Centuries-old tools and techniques, combined with superb craftsmanship, are used to create the glass industry's finest pieces of art. Creating new designs by bringing together the artist and concepts evolving from the studio art glass movement, which had its impetus in 1962, is the purpose of New American Glass, Focus, West Virginia. Over 80% of the hand-blown glass produced in the United States is made in West Virginia. Realizing this, the Huntington Galleries initiated a project to stimulate appreciation for West Virginia's unique glass craft industry and to enhance that industry's creative potential. Joel Philip Myers, former designer for Blenko Glass in Milton, West Virginia, served as consultant for the project. Joel's workshop was held at Seneca Glass in Morgantown.
I worked at a glass factory for 7 years, you know, well, it's a kind of place where you have to adjust yourself. You have to acclimate yourself, and especially in a factory like this, where you're dealing with other professionals doing something quite different than what you're doing, especially at this factory. Seneca is doing something quite different than what I normally do, and they're doing production. They're doing 300-400 pieces at a turn, and these men do that every day, and they work with clear glass, crystal glass every day. And for example, the annealing, tempering glass here is done in 3 hours. Well, some of the things that I do at home are much heavier, require a good deal more annealing. And we were really very afraid that we would lose a lot of these heavy pieces that I was making. And we've had some luck with that. I don't think it has been any major problem, but we're still not quite sure they're annealed that well. But I think so far it's all right. But at the same time, when a piece is made here, a single goblet is made in a team, many people. And in order to relate any ideas to production, those ideas would have to be somewhat consistent with the production techniques that are used here. Yesterday we started blowing with, they let us have one of the blowers, a retired man. And then we started to really get going. I really feel started to do some things, techniques that were familiar with us, and with him blowing, there was a sense of the factory, so to speak, being part of it. We weren't as removed. Here was an actual worker, one of the people here, working with us, and to me it felt as if there was more sense of ease or comfort or family, if you will, you know, in that respect. For example, today, so we made goblets today. Well, when they saw me pull a stem, they said they could relate to that. They say, well, you know, he can do a stem, and there's some sense of quality or skill that they can relate to, you know. And it was really especially nice today when I've made a lot of goblets, and I enjoy making them, and so I chose that as a kind of performance for us because it was also possible to work it out in a very logical way here. So we took the basic bowl shape which Emil could blow into without a stem. We did the pattern and design on the first 2 gathers, and Emil blew in the mold, and then David brought me the stem, and I could pull the stem. We pulled the stem, and then Bill Zick put the foot on, and so it became a much more closer, much closer to the normal factory rhythm, using several people to perform one particular function. Each of our experiences, that is to say those 5 other people and myself, are completely different. And no matter where you go, you take your experience with you.
Jamie Carpenter, who held his workshop at Fostoria Glass in Moundsville, is an instructor in nature studies at Rhode Island School of Design in Providence.
Essentially, I work as a sculptor using glass, using primarily plate glass, and work using glass as a fine art medium, showing my work, you know, in galleries like in New York or whatever. And I sort of came involved with the glass work, actually with glass blowing, about 8 years ago. And my interest in the glass blowing took me to to Italy and to Europe, working for quite a few different corporations in Europe, designing functional glassware for those companies. First of all, I guess I have a real great respect for glass workmen at any factory, like whether they're in Italy, where they have a very high degree of technical offhand blowing skill, or even at a factory like here at Fostoria, where the skill isn't necessarily offhand, but they still possess the capabilities of dealing with the glass. I have real respect for those capabilities that the workmen have, and sort of and realize that the economics of like the present situation require factories to lead more and more towards mechanization, which reduces the workers' potential of building up like a personal skill, or building up a personal involvement with the material, simply because he's limited to simply feeding a machine, or simply limited to being one small step within a mechanized process. The majority of the glass working at this factory, the only real blown work that they do, glass blowing work that they do, is simply mold blowing, like the upper portion of a goblet. It's simply, very quickly, they blow a small bubble that is then passed on to another man, who attaches like a pressed piece of glass for a stem or whatever. And the actual skill involved in doing this is something that it's not really that great a skill. I mean, it's not a skill that demands any high degree of capability. And it's also a skill that's very shortly going to become mechanized. I mean, it already is mechanized in Europe, where they've gotten totally away from relying on manpower to do this type of blown work. And I'm sure Fostoria is going to be going more and more towards bringing in similar machines to those that are used in Europe to duplicate what has been known as a blown gobbling functional glassware for those companies. First of all, I guess I have a real great respect for glass workmen at any factory, like whether they're in Italy, where they have a very high degree of technical offhand blowing skill, or even at a factory like here at Fostoria, where the skill isn't necessarily offhand, but they still possess the capabilities of dealing with the glass. I have real respect for those capabilities that the workmen have, and sort of and realize that the economics of like the present situation require factories to lead more and more towards mechanization, which reduces the workers' potential of building up like a personal skill, or building up a personal involvement with the material, simply because he's limited to simply feeding a machine, or simply limited to being one small step within a mechanized process. The majority of the glass working at this factory, the only real blown work that they do, glass blowing work that they do, is simply mold blowing, like the upper portion of a goblet. It's simply, very quickly, they blow a small bubble that is then passed on to another man, who attaches like a pressed piece of glass for a stem or whatever. And the actual skill involved in doing this is something that it's not really that great a skill. I mean, it's not a skill that demands any high degree of capability. And it's also a skill that's very shortly going to become mechanized. I mean, it already is mechanized in Europe, where they've gotten totally away from relying on manpower to do this type of blown work. And I'm sure Fostoria is going to be going more and more towards bringing in similar machines to those that are used in Europe to duplicate what has been known as a blown goblet or whatever. And as a result of that, all the workmen are going to be losing more and more of their contact with the material or contact with their craft. And I think this program that I've been a part of, like over this past week, is obviously just a start in terms of introducing companies that are flexible in terms of their production outlook to some of the potential that might be involved in working with designers who are coming out of these university situations.
Mark Pizer, whose workshop was held at Fenton Glass in Williamstown, is presently a producing craftsman of free-blown glass in Penland, North Carolina.
I think the term designer glass doesn't completely satisfy me, in that in my shop I produce pieces and not only design them but execute them, develop the materials, the glasses that they're made out of, have perhaps more of a total control of the piece than the term designer normally applies anyway. Well, the thing we're doing today is we decided on a form, then we got here and we tried to find a mold, an existing mold that it could be blown in. So we made a sort of a compromise. We found a mold that was around and ready-made, and which isn't quite the shape we like, and then we altered it a little bit, and then didn't really take the time to do it right, so the form's a little bit funny. So we've been hassling that problem. We needed, on this piece, it's supposedly going to end up with some butterfly, or perhaps several butterflies, kind of flying through the air towards a sprig of flowers or branch of some kind. So we made up a mold, or people in the tool shop made up a little mold to just mold a butterfly that will then be applied to the piece as it's being blown. Instead of at home, I'd apply just a gob of hot glass and tool it into shape, which is kind of time consuming and not reliable enough, you've got to be on top of it and so forth. So we made up a mold and had to do some revisions on that before it was working properly. We've had to run tests. The glass that we wanted to make this piece on is the Burmese glass they use here, which is a kind of a custard color that fades to a pinkish, reddish pink up at the top where it's been reheated, which I feel is really kind of an elegant glass. And there are problems in working this glass. If it's worked or reheated too many times, the whole glass will turn pink. The whole shape will turn pink, and you won't retain this color variation, which I like. And so we've been running tests and working with the hand shop workers out here to be able to get these colored applications on the vase without, and still maintaining this without a significant reheating or letting the piece get too cold to where this color variation will no longer exist. We made up a Millefiori cane, drew it out of little flowers that are going to be applied on the piece. And the tool shop had to make up a small mold for that. And then the chemists have been working out glasses so we can get colors that seem suitable. And we've got those made, ready to go. There've been a lot of problems with the chemistry of the glasses The viscosities of the different colors have to be similar, as well as the expansions, so that when all this stuff is applied together and blown out or blown into the form, they all move in a rather predictable way, so that we can retain these images that are going to be put up much smaller than in the final blown out form. But I think that when you're in the situation of actually producing it physically, as well as mentally, that there's an extra little something that you can hopefully impart to the object.
Harvey Littleton, who grew up in the glass town of Corning, New York, is presently a professor of art at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. His workshop was held at Pilgrim Glass in Ceredo.
Years ago, I decided not to be a designer, but to be an artist. And I started out in pottery, and then I got going in the glass, because I was born in the glass town, Corning, New York, and I saw glass very, very early as an exciting medium. And the drama of the glass, of course, caught me. And then after the war, I did one piece at the Corning Glass Works in a slip cast glass, which I fired, and was purchased by a museum. And it was a very exciting thing. And then I tried to work in glass, but there was no way. There was no way to get in the factory to do it, and we knew no way of doing it outside of the factory. But the problem now is to get the artist back in the factory again, because many of the people who are studying glass have never seen a factory, never been in one, don't know what the factory technology is, don't know what the standards of the materials are in terms of the factory, because all they've been worked with is the little studio setup. These men, like Roberto Moretti here at Pilgrim, are in themselves artists. Not the trained artists that comes out of the art schools and universities of today, but men with great sensitivity and feeling for the material. Glass is an exciting material. It's a material that'll do most anything you want it to. It's extremely responsive. It's responsive not only to the person who's handling it, but it's responsive after it's cold to the light, to its environment, and it almost has a life of its own. You know, the way glass plays with light and color and all of its qualities. It's almost magic. And so this is what interested the artist. We don't really have techniques as such. We play with the glass, and we get involved with it, and we react to it. This morning I was using a cranberry red, that's the name they give it here. It's a pinkish red. And then they have a deep, dark ruby red. And so the last piece that I made, that we made together, Alberto and myself, was an undergather of the cranberry and an overgather of the ruby with the crystal matrix. And it gave, I think, perhaps the most exciting functional piece that we made during the course of the workshop this morning. It was an experience which I enjoyed. It's a kind of idea that I've used in a non-objective form, sculptural form, before, but in this case, it's used for a vase. It's not a technique as such. It's a reaction to the material. When we come into the factory, we react to the material. We react to the noise and the surroundings. We react to the men that we work with. And of course, we react to the management. I mean, after all, it has to have a commercial reality if it's to be in a factory. Want to hear?
Presently serving as adjunct professor of art at Rhode Island School of Design in Providence, on leave from Ohio University, is Fritz Dreisbach. Fritz's talents were displayed at a workshop in Milton, West Virginia, at Blenko Glass.
I have to point out that this is one of my first adventures in designing. I have not been trained as a designer in any kind of schooling or program. I'm feeling my way along. I'm trying to understand what designing for industry is. My background and my training is as a college teacher primarily. My goals are pretty much to find out what I can do in a factory that I cannot do at home. That's been my attitude. That was my attitude when I came down here last weekend. But here's a factory that's been put at my disposal with experts, real experts. They know exactly how to use spin molds. So I'm using them. I use the men in the way that they're used to working. I keep them in the same team that they normally work with. They all understand each other. I can give my instructions to any one of the 6 men, and they will all receive the information in the proper time, in the proper manner. They're wonderful men. And, Shorty is my blower, and Connie is my finisher, and all the other men that work with them are really super people. And I want to give them an awful lot of credit for the skill that they have and for the type of personality that they have that allows them to cooperate with me. And a lot of credit to Mr. Blenko for being so cooperative to help me also. The way I design is I don't have a very good idea of the piece most often. I work with the molten glass, and I work with Shorty and Connie to try to develop a piece. And we don't like keep working and working on one piece until it's right. The method that I found most successful here is to do many pieces and make a small variation in each one until we get it exactly right. Then that's the piece. And then that piece will be photographed, and if it were going to be put on the line, at that point a drawing would be made of the piece, a precise drawing, a rendering actually, a mechanical drawing. A mold would be carved from the drawing, and then that piece would be produced. And that's the way I'm working. And I have this display here, which is a real workshop. This is a real working area right here. I set these pieces up and study them, and they're in order. They're in a certain order such that these pieces are part of a solution. Maybe none of them are all right, but maybe I want the top of this one to work with the bottom of that one. Well, all I have to do is bring Shorty in here and say, Shorty, I want this top, I want this bottom. And he goes out there and works until he does it. Now that's the way I work that's the way I am working with the Blenko glass team. It's a real team effort here. The main goal is to experience what I can experience from industry and to give to industry what I can give to industry. The spin-off, actually, in my mind, is to provide the galleries with a very interesting show. Well, it's going to be an extremely interesting show because this is not all of the work that will be in the show, you see. I'm going to have the pieces that I created in my own environment under very controlled conditions, which is much different than here.
Henry Halem, associate professor at Kent State University, held his workshop at Viking Glass in Huntington.
My concept has undergone kind of a radical change coming in contact with the real factory. These are things you read about, sociologists study, and so on. Actually working in the environment and getting to know the people. And I doubt if this short of time in any way, you know, I'm being accepted as a designer or an artist or a glassworker. I think I'm just another person to them in the factory who's a stranger that's doing some very strange kind of things, especially today when I was dribbling glass on this press. I've seen this before. But primarily the idea of philosophy about design is I see glass as a material and not as making any specific kind of product. I see it as a material to be dealt with in such a way as primarily one has to understand the nature of what glass is and what it can do. Now obviously this, at all factories, primarily make objects that are containers. I primarily see myself more as a worker in glass and not a glass blower as such. My primary object with glass is not to blow glass. I like to see glass as a sculptural material, which doesn't mean it can't be adapted, you know, to make a product. Now what I'm doing today, I could conceive of the concept for the line to introduce kind of a chaotic kind of individual thing into this plate pressing thing to give kind of a really handmade kind of look. See, I'd like to introduce something counter to the way they work here. The rigidity of this is really very difficult for me to relate to. It's very rigid. As most factories are, they make a product that they have to sell, and what they sell, they make, you know. So what they're making what they sell. I would like to see them make a whole different kind of line with this kind of press thing. I can relate to the press. Now I can relate to that in doing, as you saw me doing, some pretty funky things with it. I would like to see them, you know, be able to see beyond that and have them design and say, you know, hey, you know, that may be nice. Let's bring the guy in and let's just dribble some glass or control the dribbles in such a way in the plate and make a individual service kind of thing, you know, and have a higher price. I don't know how they'll view it. I'm just going to present the idea and let them pick it up. I can't say, you do this. They may not relate to anything I do at all. They may think it is a total failure. I don't. I think it's been one of the most unique experiences I have ever had in my life. Just to be able to work in the factory and get to know these people and have them get to know me. As I said to you earlier, I got insulted out there. Fine, I'm sure they see me as some kind of very strange person coming in and not doing what they do and getting paid to just dribble glass on their machine. You know, they see these things very differently than I do. They have to be here every day and work on that, and I'm sure they don't want to see someone coming in and just dribble garbage on their press. So I can understand. It hurts a little, you know, to have some guy come by with a smile and insult the hell out of you. So I went back and insulted him in a very gentlemanly way.